Welcome to this video tutorial. This is a quick guide how to do the methods in context and how it is marked in relation to the levels. This is a must-see video if you are new to studying A-levels or you are a new teacher. This will give you a little bit of an overview of the methods in context, which is the my most favourite part to teach, to mark it and support students in improving their answers. Also, if you are liking the videos, please ensure that you are clicking the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any new videos that I will be posting in the run-up to the summer exams. So what is the methods in context? This question is a 20 marker. It is on paper 1, Education with Theory and Methods. It will be question number 5. You should be spending 30 minutes on this question with the instruction to use the item for the hooks as well as give strengths and weaknesses of the method asked for. The main focus is to apply to the given context in education. So when you are doing this question, you have got to consider the characteristics of the people, the group, the students, the teachers being studied and how it impacts the research. So to show good AO1 of the method and the characteristics of the research, make sure that you are applying to the school and the context in the question using the item and your own knowledge. And do not forget to evaluate strengths and weaknesses, faults and pitfalls of studying the group in question. So as the student is answering the question, as the examiner is marking it, each statement or point that the student makes will be marked in levels. These levels will correspond with the mark scheme, for example level 1, level 2, etc. The lower levels are going to be weak and undeveloped, higher levels are going to be specific and developed. So following marking for this paper, both in 2017 and in 2018, the guidance for examiners were to annotate the student answer in their levels and at the end of the answer count up how many of each level to indicate the overall band that they would end up in on the mark scheme. Now this is something that I'm going to address in another tutorial where I go for a student answer. Okay, so for the case of this tutorial I'm just going to give you examples of what the different levels actually are. So for the case of this tutorial, I'm looking at the exam question from summer 2017. It's off the full A-level paper, paper 1. So for your reference, here is the question and here is the item for the question that I am looking at. So let's have a little bit of a look at some of the levels. So basically level 1 is something that's copied from the item. It might be a point about a method, or it might be about the wrong method, or it could be just about the context with no application whatsoever. So just to give you a couple more than a couple triple examples. So as you can see, you've got something about labelling with no application to the method, or you might have a quote from the item with no development, or just simply a confusion between experiments and in this case observation. Moving on, level 2 is a stated strength or weakness, no development, no application to education or to the context, or no real elaboration. So it might be in a fuller sentence, but it's often only about the method only or generic research, and this lacks the explanation to achieve higher they tended to be stated. Okay, so just to explain what you mean, for example this one, they tend to be higher in validity. They need to explain what do we mean by high in validity and why are they high in validity, just a little bit more. Okay, they study cause and effect. Okay, tell me a bit more to get higher than level 2. These are just stated points, but they're not explained. Okay, and in the case of getting the permission from the gatekeeper, there's no real clarification or application to who in education that gatekeeper might be, which would get them to level 3. Level 3 is a strength or weakness of the method which is developed enough. It might have some limited application to the education context, or there might be no application to the context of labelling in this case. So as you can see, there is more of a chunky explanation. Students at this level are able to explain the strength or weakness, and it is developed actually quite well. As you can see from the 2 examples, there is limited application. There is some, but it's a limited application to education. Okay, so have a little bit of a look at that one. Small scale, bit time consuming because of a timetable that school has to follow. Now, when you have a little bit of a look at the second one, an advantage of FE field experiments, that it's natural, it's a strength because it increases the ecological validity as teachers or pupils are acting as they would on a regular basis. Now this is where confusion often arises, both with students and even teachers marking this type of question. I hear students say, but I said pupils, I said teachers, I mentioned it, I mentioned school, I've referred to teachers. But this is what I want to clarify. The student might have mentioned teachers and pupils, they have name dropped them, okay, but this is superficial. You could easily name drop if you were researching doctors or police officers or even traffic wardens, okay. So they've got to explain a little bit more about the characteristics of these people within this context to get level 4, okay? It's not enough just to do a little cheeky name drop. Okay, so moving on. So at this level, the student has good knowledge about the method, but it's limited in the application to the school or the context. Level 4, we are starting to see the strengths and weaknesses of the method, the application to the method to the context in the question. For example, labelling, it's undeveloped, it's nearly there. There is focused characteristics of the context as well that is given. So let's have a look at some examples. We're starting to see more developed answers here. These examples show a clear application to the school context, generally of research in general, but it is applied to context in the question, in this case a little bit about labelling. So for example, this first one holds a decent weakness of field experiments being about consent, being under 18, needing vulnerable group DBS and things like that, getting permission. There is a link to the labelling of students, but this is undeveloped and there's nothing really that tells me anything about field experiments. It tells me about if I was researching these groups to investigate labelling. And the head teacher might not allow it, which is fine, but there's nothing specific about field experiments. It's just research in generic. This second example is very similar. There's a clear weakness of the sample. They might not be involved, but yet again, there's nothing specific about field experiments. They're saying, oh, it's like being observed by Ofsted or whatever. It needs to be a little bit more explicit to the field experiment parts to get level 5. It's got the labelling part, but it's not got the field experiment part. So at this point, you have got the whole shebang, okay? Strength and weakness of the method, plus the context in the question when studying the education of a specific group. And these examples you can clearly see are chunky paragraphs. You can see the clear development. So example 1, you can see the student has looked at a similar point from 2 aspects. They've looked at it from the student point of view about being labelled negatively, causing them to be embarrassed, not wanting to take part, be misbehaving, truanting. But then they also look at it from the teacher's point of view. They don't want to participate because it's a sensitive subject and they don't want to take part in case that they are labelling students negatively. And they cement the explanation, they cement this application by concluding that the problem with a field experiment, which is aimed to predict the effect of teacher labelling, is that the sample may consist of those who are labelled positively, meaning that you cannot detect the impact of teacher labelling on students' achievement because you're only getting those that are positively being labelled and not the negatively labelled. Likewise, paragraph or example 2, this student has wisely applied to Rosenthal and Jacobson, which was a field experiment about labelling, well, more specifically about the self-fulfilling prophecy, but that is still part of the labelling process, and this student does apply it quite well. Most students did apply Rosenthal and Jacobson in this way, did score a level 5. But just ensure you're not just describing the study, it needs to flow in your answer, it needs to apply to the question that is set. So overall there are 5 levels, from level 1, which is just stated, either copy from the item, undeveloped, wrong method, to a develop strength or weakness of the method, get into the education context, to specifically a well-explained application to the context that is given in the question. I saw this will help you with your structure. There's also a video, the link is below, how to structure for the methods in context. I'm going to go through a student answer as well, who does follow something briefly like this, where they go through the practical, ethical, theoretical, but you remember you've got to apply it to the context in the question. So as always, thank you for watching. I'm currently working on this follow-up video which goes through a student answer, just showing exactly how these students are marked. Just check out some of the related videos that are linked below. So how to structure a methods in context answer, researching subcultures in schools using observations, that's a bit more of a podcast one, and is using secondary sources to investigate schools. That's also a podcast one as well. But if you have any questions, please drop me a comment. If you've appreciated what you have watched, please click like. Want to see more? Click subscribe. And if you've got a question, please send me an email. My email to this channel is below. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day.